Hey, all you rad dads out there.
Okay, perfect. So, David, thanks for joining me on the Rad Dads show. I'm going to start the way we always do. Who are you?
I'm David Guillas. Many people know me as Beave. I used to play in the band Propagandhi as a guitar player. Since then, I've become a teacher. I'm now a teacher and also a dad.
Right, and you're doing a one other new project as well lately.
Oh, the guitar
Building
building.
guitars, yeah.
That's become a bit of an obsession. That's something I'm really passionate about, and any spare time I have in my pretty busy life, I devote to that. And I've got some ambitions. I'm just it's something I'm really interested in, and I really love. I really love doing it.
Yeah. So, well, maybe we'll get back to that in a little bit. I want to find out. So, how many kids do you have?
I have one kid. She's 6 years old. Just turned 6.
Okay. Oh, right on. I have a 5-year-old daughter, so she'll be 6 at the end of the year. So we're kind of in the same zone there. Yeah, kindergarten. Yeah. So how are you guys managing with like the whole COVID thing? And I guess first year of school would have been a COVID year.
Yeah,
So
well, that's right.
How did that go?
I think through this all, we've been pretty privileged and pretty lucky. We've stayed healthy, and Catherine, my daughter, she's an only child, but kind of just born to be an only child in many ways. Just she's got friends and she's quite happy to be with friends, but she's also has been managing quite well, relatively speaking, through all of this. It's not easy for a 6-year-old to be at home with adults for so much of the time. But all in all, can't really complain. We've been, knock on wood, been lucky so far.
Yeah, that's kind of the key, right? Like staying healthy, that's the primary thing, and hopefully we just kind of get through this. So I like, as father of a kid of a similar age, like I found it really amazing how like just adaptable they are to this whole thing. My daughter, at least, like she's like, she gets it. She talks about COVID, and she knows she's got to wear the mask, and it's just not a thing.
Yeah, it's likewise with our daughter. She some of the things she says is kind of like, oh yeah, maybe we should be a little more careful talking around the dinner table, because not all of us are in our 40s here. There's a 6-year-old here.
Right.
But I feel for kids, and I feel for her, because this is going on over a year now, and for a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, as my daughter is, that's a big chunk of her life.
Yeah.
Living like this, and it's hard. It's hard for kids, and it's and in my classroom, I teach grade 5 and grade 6. Again, I just see such resilience from the kids, but oh man, it's just got to be so tough to be a kid. Right?
That social aspect is like huge, right? At this point there. I mean, it really is, like throughout, like and for everybody. I shouldn't like minimize it and just say it's about kids, but for sure with kids, it's amazing. I don't know, like you're in Winnipeg, right? So yeah. I'm in Edmonton, similar type of climate. I'm sure kids are excited to be getting outside more now and getting to at least go run around with other kids a little bit.
Yeah, that's right. As long as the weather cooperates. I don't know about it in Edmonton, but it's been up and down here in Winnipeg.
It has been here too. It's been pretty nice the last little bit. I heard there's more snow coming, but no surprise.
Oh, yay.
Yeah, exactly. So this is the Rad Dad show. Are you a Rad Dad?
I don't know. I don't know. I guess you'd have to ask my daughter. It's funny. I asked her, am I a Rad Dad? And she said, well, yes, of course. Hello there.
Oh, here's my daughter, Elise. Is it bedtime?
Hi, Elise. I try. I take the job seriously. I try my best, but I'm winging it. I'm learning as I go, and it's a tough job with many rewards.
Yeah, for sure. So, like, if I flipped the question around and asked you what are the traits of a Rad Dad, if you're kind of looking out and deciding on what those characteristics are, what would you say?
I think that's a tough one, but what I know as a dad, and also as a teacher, more so as a dad though, is to just be present.
Right.
Meaning, like, get down in your kid's world and experience their world with them. And for me, I find all the other mistakes I make, as long as I make an effort to be present and to experience my daughter's world with her, which isn't always about me trying to impart my knowledge and things like that. It's like getting down in there and asking the questions with her and wondering with her and playing with her and discovering. I think that's the baseline, and whatever happens after that is great. But I think that's the place to start, and that's where you start. That's where you form those connections, and the connection is key.
Just kind of getting down on the floor, being right there with them, experiencing what they're experiencing, whatever that is.
Yeah, and even if it's not your thing, I mean, my daughter, for example, she's interested in all kinds of things that has never been part of my world. And it's just so amazing. I get to experience the world through a different lens, and it's enriching for me. And I learn a lot from her by doing so. And for me, I think that's like one of the joys of being a parent.
So what are some of those things? Like, what's changed about you from being a dad?
Well, many things. I think maybe the biggest change for me, I spent most of my life cultivating a very sort of isolated existence. I'm, an introverted person, but also just, especially as a younger dude, kind of a fearful person socially. And so I just put up these barriers and these walls and have been pretty guarded. And Catherine has kind of torn those walls down a little bit. And that's been a good thing in my life. It's been hard. It's been really hard. Like some of those personal changes that I had to make just through necessity, especially that first year, it's just really tough. But, I don't know where I heard this, but, I always tell myself, if it's not difficult, that means you're not growing.
Right.
That it's the difficulties in life and how you respond to them. That's how you grow. And I think I've learned that from my daughter in some ways.
And so, like, what were some of those things? You kind of mentioned that first year was especially hard. So, like, can you tell me a little bit about that? Like, what was hard about it?
Well, the big thing was timing. My timing was terrible because we became parents at the exact same time that I left Propagandhi and became a teacher. Right. So I was 36. And so I'd spent my entire adult life, many years, being pretty self-centered, pursuing my own self-interests, not really having any sort of responsibility other than keeping myself alive. And then all of a sudden I've got this baby. And as much as I tried to prepare myself for her arrival, it's just like you hit the ground running, and it was tough. And on top of that, I was a teacher. It's a job I'm not suited to by nature. It's an extrovert's game, and I'm an introvert, and it was just super tough. So those two things combined, having all these kids in my life all of a sudden, it was profoundly difficult that first year. But all the cliches are true. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Yeah. And I'm doing good now. So
I'm curious, what drew you to teaching? You said it wasn't kind of a natural.
Yeah.
You don't feel like it's a natural fit for you, but you must like it, and something drew you.
Yeah. I don't know what drew to, I used to sometimes joke about myself in my life. I think just being a garbage bag floating on the wind, and I just go wherever the garbage blows or whatever. I don't know. I think just being in the band, there was a time where the future seemed a little uncertain. And so I started thinking like, I better think of a backup plan here. And so I already had a degree, and I figured, well, I'd already been teaching a bit of guitar lessons. So I had a bit of, that was maybe my entry into the profession. And I just went to school, and one thing led to another. All of a sudden I was offered a job, and that was kind of it. But it was not something I never thought in a million years. If you had asked me when I was 25, would you ever be a teacher? I'd just see, what are you talking about? No way. But here I am, and I guess a really tough job for me, but it's rewarding, and I've grown a lot. Almost has killed me a couple of times. It's tough, but it's rewarding, as I say, and I'm glad I'm doing it.
And did I read somewhere that you sort of teach inner city? Is that right?
Yeah, it's downtown in Winnipeg. Yeah.
Okay. So any kind of unique aspects there that, or things that opened your eyes there that maybe you bring home as a dad from your teaching experiences?
Yeah, I guess one thing I can speak to is, I think we all hear in the news here in Canada, I'm sure Edmonton's the same, we hear about child poverty.
Yeah.
And we know it's an issue. But but having seen it in some students I've taught over the years, it's a crisis beyond what most people are aware of. Like it's appalling and shocking how much of a crisis it is. I mean, and so there's kids that have needs that are not being met, needs such as security and love and things like that, or even just food security. And so these kids struggle in the system, in the education system, and then you have governments that think the answer to everything is, I don't even know, like standardized tests or whatnot, and then no one's really addressing the problem, which is poverty. And anyway, so juxtaposing that, I think I just mispronounced that word. But
you got it. I'm following.
Juxtaposing that against my own privileged life and my daughter who doesn't have those barriers.
Right.
It's kind of heartbreaking, and I'm grateful for my own life and my daughter's experiences. But it's, I get to see both worlds, and it breaks the heart a little bit.
Yeah, helps give you some perspective too. Hey, like, so I think we were chatting sort of offline at one point. I mentioned, so Christian's a teacher, and he has done some kind of inner city type stuff as well. I worked inner city. I'm a pharmacist. I worked inner city pharmacy for a long time and got to see some of that firsthand as well. And certainly, helps give you a little bit of perspective when you're, losing your cool over, I don't know, like I didn't fill up my gas tank with gas last night, and like that's your biggest problem of the day. And then to encounter people daily who, just having a roof over their head or, enough food to eat is a challenge.
That's right.
Yeah. Although it's hard to maintain that perspective all the time, right? You kind of get lost in your own world too.
Well, for sure. And we're all human, and we all struggle, and all of our struggles are real. And and I don't mean to diminish any of the struggles that any of us feels. It's just some people struggle profoundly. It's just basic needs. And as a kid, it's impossible to learn. What's it called? We learn this in education. There's a hierarchy of needs, anyways, and love is in there, security, as well as food and water and all that.
I'm thinking like Maslow's pyramid or something.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
And if those needs aren't met, then the higher level needs, such as education, can't really happen.
Right.
Learning can't happen, and so that's what we need to address as a society. Yes.
So you kind of mentioned that that first year was especially hard for you. It sounds like kind of, and I think this is pretty common, but am I right in interpreting it that like you kind of losing that sense of self almost a little bit, or trying to figure out what that new redefined sense of self is when you've gone from selfish, and I think this is like really common, right? Because most people would have kids in their 20s or 30s, or maybe it's their 40s, but either way, you've spent a lot of time just being worried about you. So how, like, thinking, I guess, back to 5 years ago, like, how did you come to terms with that? Were there any sort of aha moments or any things that you sort of did to try and address that? Was it a conscious thing?
Partly yes, partly no. Part of it was just hanging in there, trusting that, and I should say I had, a very supportive partner who really was instrumental in getting me through all of that. That was huge. Speaking with friends such as Chris, who I used to play with in Propagandhi, I remember asking him for a bit of advice, because one of the things, I mean, this isn't everything, but for me, and it's from my conversation with Chris, it sounded like with him as well, babies, when you have a child, babies, the rewards of parenthood aren't immediately present. meaning that you got just this creature who's utterly dependent on parents for survival, but they don't speak. They don't, I'm not sure what I'm not really saying it properly, but it's like the payback, for lack of a better word, is immediate. And I remember Chris saying, like, you got to stay there, be present. And you put in those hours. And then when your kid is old enough to share their personality, you're there and you've made that connection. And like hearing him say that helped for sure. And speaking with other friends as well helped get through it.
Like just to hear that this is normal, the way you're feeling.
That too. Yeah. That too. I have to be honest with that first year, trying to think back on it. And maybe this is why I'm having a hard time articulating it. It's a blur.
Yeah.
It was really tough. And I think part of my psyche has sort of put it on a dark shelf to never
Block
think
it
about
out.
it, because it was really hard to get through.
Yeah, it's all, yeah. And I totally identify with that. Like, I'm not sure I've really talked about it that much before, but like, I don't know if, is it like even just that bonding, like maybe you don't feel that bonded to your child yet. And then you feel guilty about that. And then it's just this whole cycle of, you don't maybe know that that's maybe a normal feeling and it will get better. Right. And so how do you, I think that support network is really important, right? To hear from other people, like they've had a similar experience.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It definitely, that first year is really tough. So I've got two, my oldest daughter's 5, my youngest is 2. But you sort of like go through that again the second time. In our case, I felt like that second time was so much easier for that. I think for that reason, I realized like, okay, this is really tough right now, but it's going to get better. Right. And then once they're able to communicate with you and, you can talk to each other, communicate in some way, it makes a big difference.
Definitely. Yeah.
And it too can depend. Like I think it's tough for dads in that way too. And that those early months, because the baby's so physically connected to the mom too, right? So that can be part of it as well.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, there's like a physical connection and a physical need between the baby and mom in those early days. And we went through it together. There was a lot of sleepless nights and a lot of stress and worry about, is this going the way it's supposed to be going? And is it normal that she's crying this much? And, all those fears.
Yeah. I definitely remember a couple of trips to the emergency department where we get there and the doctors are just like, yeah, she's fine. It's fine.
But, yeah, likewise, better safe than sorry, right? But
exactly. Yeah.
I just don't know.
What are the most rewarding aspects of being a father?
Well, I think I spoke to one aspect already about just the joy of connecting and the joy of, I guess on a selfish level, the joy of learning about yourself through this part of you that's becoming their own person. And the joy of just watching their personality bloom, that's so rewarding. Also for me, I was adopted, and I've met my biological parents 10 or 12 years ago or so. And that was really a neat experience because I've never in my life, like no one in my life or anyone I love is like, there's no biological connection. And I never thought there was anything to that. I just thought, well, because I had a good upbringing and loving parents. But then when my daughter was born, I realized like, oh no, there's something to that flesh and blood connection. And like that's been really powerful for me to, I see myself in my daughter. I see myself in someone else for the first time.
Yeah.
And it's really neat to see her, she has her own personality and she's her own person fiercely. So, but it is cool to see yourself in someone else, and to feel that cellular connection, for lack of a better way of putting it.
Yeah, there definitely is something there for sure. It's hard to kind of put your finger on it or quantify it, but you know, outside of maybe you have similar like appearance in some ways or something like that, but
Even certain like tendencies and certain like ways of, my partner Mandy and I talk about this sometimes, and sometimes my daughter will react to something and I just like, oh, I get that, I understand that 100%, whereas Mandy might not, and then vice versa. Like sometimes Catherine will react in a way where I just don't get it, but Mandy gets it, because that, you know, she's exerting different aspects of what she's inherited from us.
Yeah, so interesting.
Yeah.
So you kind of, so you mentioned you were adopted. So what was your relationship with your adoptive father like?
Complicated.
Okay.
But very, you know, he was a loving, very present person in my life for, well, for, you know, for my whole life. But as he kind of dropped out of the picture a little bit, I suppose, once I became an adolescent. You know, hindsight's 2020, and it's easy to bag on your parents for the mistakes they make. And I don't think I want to do that too much here, but especially now being a dad myself, I know I've made mistakes and I will make mistakes.
Yeah.
But hopefully, you know, we can learn from our own mistakes, but also maybe from the mistakes that the ones that have come before us have made.
Yeah. So,
you know?
yeah. So is there like anything you sort of taken from your relationship with your dad that you kind of apply in your parenting? Anything conscious that you really think about there?
I think a lot of like time spent. I think I've taken a bit from him, like time spent with, I mean, I have memories of him, you know, building me a tree house, for example.
Mm-hmm.
That was great. However, like he never let me touch his tools. That's something to this day I resent, because like why wouldn't you let me touch those tools? I'm so interested, and he just wouldn't let me. You know, so I'm grateful for the time I spent with him, and I've also learned, like, just let your kids play with their tools. It's okay. Just don't be so guarded and so controlling. I think that's part of it. You know, don't. I mean, your kids are learning. They're going to pick up I'm using tools as an example, but it could be anything. You know, cooking, chopping. For example, this evening I was making supper with my daughter. She wanted to chop the vegetables, and my first instinct reaction is like, no, because the way you cut those cucumbers is just absurd. And but then of course it's like, well, no, like this is time well spent with each other. Let her cut the dang cucumbers, and who cares if they look all mangled and disgusting. It's you know, we're spending time together, and that's more important than anything, you know. So that's something I learned from my dad. Spending time with each other is important, and also let your ego go a little bit. Just let your kids experience things, and it's okay if they don't do it right the first 20 times, you know.
It's hard as a parent to give up that control, I think. And part of that might go back to, you know, all that time you spent just focusing on yourself and always having control over the situation, right? So I can relate to that a little bit, because I'm definitely like a type A perfectionist kind of person. And even in some of the things you're saying, I'm just like, yeah, I've definitely done that, right? Where I'm just like, no, like, don't touch that. You're going to hurt yourself. You're going to, you know, and you do have to kind of step back and think, well, they need to have those experiences, right? And who better to show them?
Yeah. And I also try, and I've learned this from when I first started teaching. I was really lucky to have this amazing mentor. Her name's Cheryl Zubrak. And she kind of was trying to teach me this inquiry approach to learning, where it's like, it's not about top down. It's not about imparting your knowledge into another person or to a student, but it's about like fostering those experiences and curiosities, and, you know, knowledge building within, and learning from mistakes, and like the process. And I learned so much from her, and that's informed me so much, I think, as a parent as well, because it's so easy. You want to just, you know, especially at the age of our daughters, kindergarten, this is the age when, you know, literacy starts, and the reading, and then you start, you know, the neighbors' kids are already reading a certain level, and you get this competitive feeling and this worry, like, oh, are my kids falling behind, you know? And I try to fight that, because my daughter's going to learn how to read. if it happens right now or in a year, like, does it really matter? And I'd rather her discover reading, and I'd rather her discover it, with me and my partner Mandy, and us helping her and guiding her. But I don't want it to become all about drills and like doing it because you're supposed to and all that. Like, it's complicated and it's not always easy. And some days I'm like, it'd just be easier to just give her a drill or something here. But I'm trying to help her kind of be her own learner and not do it for extrinsic reasons, but intrinsically being motivated to discover the joy of it herself.
Yeah, and like it's like once they have that aha moment, it's like it totally changes, right? We've been going through the same thing with reading, where we're supposed to sit down and read some books on this app every night, and like she'll get so frustrated that she almost starts crying, and it's like, why am I doing this? Like, this should not be the experience. And we talked to the teacher, and the teacher was like, yeah, definitely just take a break, right? Like, don't force it. But you do feel that, I don't know if it's like competitive, but you certainly like worry, like, are they where they're supposed to be? Like, should I be doing something differently? Did I screw her up? Did I, all that stuff?
Yeah, because we want our kids to excel, and reading is a very important skill.
Yeah.
And I want her to, because she just loves books and stories. And I mean, if she had her way, we would just read her stories all day. And I just can't wait for her to discover the empowering feeling of like being able to sit down whenever she wants and she can read a book on her own. And I think she's got this whole rich world just waiting there for her.
Yeah.
And part of me is impatient. Like, you're going to love this. Let's do this. But it's like the second it becomes more about me and my goals, I think that's a little bit of a failure in my own view.
Yeah, and like they feel that too, right? Like they feel that pressure, and feel your like I don't know if it's disappointment or whatever, but they feel that, and then you don't want your kid to get that feeling from you.
Yeah, that's right. Because the time together is precious, right? And if it's all about, if they're stressed out about something like that, that maybe sullies the time together a little bit,
Yeah, I'm like recalling. Sorry, go ahead. There you go.
I was just gonna say, I mean, I recognize I'm a little bit naive. I'm a new dad, relatively speaking, and I've never done this before, so I realize I'm a bit naive in all this, and there's a long journey ahead with potential struggles and whatnot. But at this point in time, I'm enjoying. She's at just this really exciting age where she's at the beginning of this amazing learning journey, and I'm excited to experience it with her. Yeah,
that's awesome. How do you achieve kind of let's call it work-life balance? Like you're teacher, so you're 9 to 5, I'm sure, and then you come home and that's your time with your child. How do you kind of achieve that balance?
I don't know. I think I work in a profession. A lot of people are drawn into education. That's their passion, and so I think for a lot of teachers, it's really hard to just leave it at work and come home. And I don't want to say it's not my passion, but it's not something I aspire to be my whole life. I take it seriously, and I want to be good. But I also I love spending time with my daughter. And so I don't know, it's just, I don't find it that hard. I guess my partner and my daughter might say otherwise, because I probably talk a lot about work when I'm at home, but I don't find it that difficult to leave it. And I've got other interests that I would say are my passions, like music. I play in a band. We're called Agassiz. We just recorded this last weekend, actually.
Right. I saw some pictures, and you were playing one of your guitars.
That's right. I played actually a couple other guitars I've made, which is another passion of mine. So I guess my life is balanced with different interests, and not a lot of time in the day to accomplish it all. So you kind of have to compartmentalize yourself a bit if you want to get various things done.
So you do have, you've got this hobby, you're and maybe becoming more than a hobby, right? Building guitars. You've got Agassiz, or recording, so you've got some new material coming out. Like, how important is it to you to have, and maybe this goes back to our previous conversation about that sense of self, but how important is that to you in your experience as a parent, to have your own kind of stuff, your own hobbies and things like that?
Oh, I think it's really important as a parent and also as a teacher. Because if you're just one thing, I don't even know how to express this, but I just feel like, I feel like this is me on my high horse. I think if you want to be a good teacher or you want to be a good parent, you need to be a complete person. And you can't just be one thing. If you're just one thing, I don't know. It's just like, what's informing you as a parent? What's informing you as a teacher? If that's all you do, I think you need to be informed by your interests, other interests. There's a big life and a big world out there to experience. And I think those experiences are important. And I think there's lots of different ways to grow as a person. But if you're just one thing and you define yourself as just one thing, I don't know if that's, I guess everyone's got their own way of going about their life. But for me, I just feel like that's not the way I operate.
Do you think there's like pressure to put those things to the side? Do you feel that sort of like societally, or?
Yeah, I realize it's out there. Yeah, I don't know if I feel the pressure. Yeah.
Like you've dealt with it. You've found that sort of balance for you, right? Like I would say, I don't know, like in my own experience, I don't know that I've necessarily felt the pressure to put those things aside, focus on being a dad. But you do sometimes feel like, at least for me, like, oh, sometimes I'm making a decision between like my family and my hobby, or my thing. So you have to kind of figure out that balance, right? Where
Yeah, and my partner Mandy and I, we have a very good balance where, because we both have these really intense interests outside of work and parenting, and we make an effort to give each other time for that. And my daughter's very aware of that. And even when I'm hanging out with my daughter, I mean, very often I'll strap on my guitar and I'm playing away,
right.
which often drives her crazy because she just wants me to be playing Lego with her. And I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not like I'm just playing my guitar all the time. But I don't know. I think it's kind of good for her to see her parents as creative people who are interested in other things other than her. So hopefully this is good as an only child. Hopefully it's good for her sense of self and how, she's not the center of the universe. You know what I mean? Maybe that's just my way of rationalizing spending too much time with my own interests. But
no, I think, like, I don't know, your kids like to see you happy and you doing things that make you happy too. And then they're kind of, whether they are interested in it or not, they're, I don't know, my experience has been, by the virtue of the fact that you're interested in it, they think it's cool. They just want to, they're curious. What are you up to?
Yeah. And I see that. And, my daughter used to hate everything to do with guitars. It just drove it. She just didn't like it. I didn't like the sound. And that's starting to change. And now she knows I'm really into building guitars. And so she'll actually, sometimes when she sits down and draws, she'll draw a guitar.
Cool.
And it's just like, she'll get some of the details really accurate. Like she'll have the right number of tuning pegs for a 6-string guitar and just things like that. And I'm like, oh, you're actually paying attention. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. That's neat. So she was just not into it before. Hey, like your music and anything.
And it might have more to do with the fact that, she just wanted me 24/7 to just do whatever she wants to do. And that might have been that. Who knows? But lately I find like she really wants me to build her a guitar, and she seems interested in maybe learning how to play piano or just do some kind of music. So it's really neat to see her interests grow and develop.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a really fun, like, I feel like at this age, like that kind of 5 to 6, that's where you really start to see that, right? They kind of, part of it is they kind of make their own friends at school and stuff too, and they kind of all of a sudden have this personality that isn't completely 100% shaped by you and
Yeah.
whoever their caregivers are.
Yeah, and they have this life that is separate from us. She spends a lot, like she goes to a daycare as well as to kindergarten for half the day. So there's a good chunk of the Monday to Friday week where she's got a different life
Right.
that we're not really a part of. And classic kid, when we ask her about her day at the end of the day, she has nothing to say.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool in a way. It's almost like, no, that's my world. And I'll let you in, but it's up to me.
Yeah.
And it's hard because it's hard, but it's also really kind of special to see that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I know there's been lots of times my wife and I are like, you ask like, how was kindergarten today? What'd you do today? What did you learn about today? It's like, no, I don't remember. Nothing.
Yeah.
And it can be a little bit frustrating, but you're right. It's kind of neat. Like that's their own little world.
Yeah.
So what's next for you? You kind of mentioned a couple things. So you're building guitars, Agassiz, you're recording.
Yeah, we recorded 4 songs. It's been a long time coming. We originally booked, I think, in March, but with the various lockdowns, they come and go. It couldn't happen the first time, and it almost didn't happen this time because the government introduced some new restrictions about a week ago.
Okay.
And we were all just like, well, for sure they're going to shut this down, but no, they didn't. So we were lucky to get in there, but we haven't been able to jam as much over the last year.
Right.
So it was really nice to get in and record 4 songs. These songs that we've had them forever, they feel like old. It's nice to get them recorded and documented, and we're excited to move on and start writing some new stuff if we can ever get back in the same room again. Because right now, for the next month, it's not permitted.
Right. Yeah, it's like anybody who's doing, like, certainly we talk to lots of musicians, right? And it's like everybody's in the same boat, like having to come up with ways to do virtual shows and releasing albums kind of into the ether with no ability to tour and all that kind of stuff. So it's a weird time to be a musician. So any plans on when those songs are going to be available?
I think we're thinking maybe by the fall.
Okay.
I love playing in this band because it's having played in a band for a living, which was great. Don't get me wrong. I mean, that's the dream. But having now playing in a band where my living is not dependent on it, it's just like we can just take it as it goes, and it's pretty easy going, and we don't have to make any plans. We don't tour, and we don't have any plans or care to tour. We just do it for the love of it, and it's been great.
Yeah, awesome. And so tell me about Strange Earth Guitars too. Where are you at with that now? It seems like it wasn't that long ago when you were kind of like building your first guitar. I think I was following that on your Instagram account, and now it seems like it's kind of taking off. You said it's become an obsession.
Yeah, it did. And so I started, it's been a couple years now, not very long. 2 years ago, I decided to build my first guitar, and I picked up just basic kind of hand tools. And basically I just wanted to make a clone of the guitar I'd always had. I've only ever had one guitar, really. It's a Gibson SG, which I had the neck replaced on at one point. But anyway, I just loved it so much, I wanted another one. Because I mean, even when I was in Propagandhi, I only ever had one guitar. And I was like, I should have 2 guitars. Why didn't I have 2 guitars when I was in the band? Like if I broke a string, I'd have to. Anyways, I was a bit late on that. So yeah, I decided to learn. I had been interested in it for a while, and I just decided to go for it. I have to say, actually, that kind of attitude, the just go for it. Todd in the band, it was really an inspiration for me, getting to know the way he operates, and like he's just so focused on his passions, whether it's art or bass playing, or I guess it used to be jiu-jitsu and things like that. His commitment and his focus to improve and to grow, being around that, it was super inspiring, and I think it rubbed off on me because I just one day just decided I'm gonna go for it. This likely will be a disaster, but I'm gonna go for it. and it wasn't a disaster. The guitar works fine. Now, after I've built 5 now, I play that guitar and it's fine and it works, but it's like, oh man, like, what was I thinking with that? And
Yeah, I
there's
could have done
these
this
things
better.
I've since learned, and I feel like I've grown really fast just because I have this intense interest, and whenever I have time to myself, that's all I think about, or all I do is try to get better at building. And so it's happening fast, and I just really want to keep doing it. And I guess the next step, I built 5 guitars for myself. That's ridiculous. I don't need 5 guitars. And so I think I might try to reach out to some local people and just see if they're interested in helping me continue with my education. And in return, they would get a custom guitar and
Cool.
just keep growing and keep learning. That's the plan.
Oh, that's amazing. So one thing about your guitar, so like it seems like you're kind of incorporating like the concept of kind of sustainability and stuff like that as well. So can you chat about that a little bit?
Yeah, that's part of the process, and that's what I've kind of discovered about myself as a builder, is like that's what I want to do. And I've been the last few builds on my last build especially, I used reclaimed green ash from a tree. All the green ash trees are being killed by the emerald ash borer insect, which is an invasive species, and like they project that in the next couple decades all the ash trees are going to be gone.
Crazy.
So it's a tree that had to be cut down because it was diseased, and I just bought a board of it, and I try to use either reclaimed stuff like that, and also just more, if not local, then at least bioregional, North American hardwoods like maple, to build with. Is it the same as building with like something like a rosewood? Probably not. And any luthier would probably tell you, well, rosewood, you got to use woods like that for fretboards or whatnot. But you know what? Like my attitude anyways is like, do we deserve rosewood? Or does the rosewood deserve to exist in its forest? Because rosewood takes a long time to grow. Right. And when you're cutting that tree down, you're undoing like hundreds or at least decades, if not hundreds of years of a living thing growing.
Yeah.
And I don't like that. And I don't think we need to, especially with electric guitars. I feel like you can have a fine sounding electric guitar, if not great sounding electric guitar, using woods grown close to home and not cut down necessarily for the purpose to become something, right. But cut down because it was diseased, or maybe you're reclaiming an old piano or an old piece of furniture. I feel like there's all these options we could be doing as guitar builders that are a little more friendly to the earth. So that's kind of my approach. Yeah,
I like that. That's awesome. I have to admit, I've never really thought about that before. And just like you said, you're just like so focused. You want the best guitar. You got to get the rosewood fretboard. You got to get all that stuff that once you plug it into your amp and you run it through a distortion pedal or whatever, does it really make a big difference?
Yeah, there's all these elements that add up to tone for sure. And maybe it does sound better. And certainly with acoustic guitars, those woods, those exotic woods, I'm sure they sound better. But then, like I say, like, do we deserve that?
Yeah.
Is it worth it? Like, what's the cost? And I feel like the cost is the cost of cutting these beautiful trees down that grew for so long. It's not worth it. There's better options out there.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. Well, I wish you the best with that. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with us and talk to us on the Rad Dad Show and share your experience. It's been really great talking to you. Any kind of words of wisdom for dads out there, maybe new dads out there with your, recent experience in that department?
Well, from my own experience, you may feel self-doubt. You may feel misery even.
Yeah.
But you're likely feeling love, and you're likely feeling this intense sense of responsibility. I just think take it one day at a time. And the most important thing is the time spent with your child, and the connection, like forging those connections. I think let's just start from there. and I don't think you can go wrong.
The rest will come. Yeah. Thanks, man. It's been really great chatting with you. Yeah.